So the question we have to think about as administrators is, how do we cultivate our teachers' attitudes to believe in continuous improvement, and bottom line, that it's for the success of our students? So many teachers do not like evaluation, whether it's because of a past administrator, whether it's because they only get it once a year, they don't see the benefit to it. But it's our job as an administrator to kind of change that mindset. You know, you hear the term, everyone's a lifelong learner, but sometimes that's just a cliche that's used. And so I want you to start to think about, as we go through this next little section, what can I do on my campus when I'm talking with a teacher to let them know that going through evaluation is not just about compliance, it really is about helping our students in their success. So what I want to do now is, again, I believe a PD is only impactful if you get to have time to take something that impacts your own site and impacts your own work. So we talked about that performance management cycle, and then I'm going to give you some time to actually think about, how do you want to present things to your staff? What do you want to start with? And I'll try to give you an example of something of my thought process, but again, my thought process does not in any way have to be your thought process, but I want to honor you and give you that time. So I want you to start thinking about, you are going to have to present evaluations to your staff. You're going to have to present and work on starting to cultivate why it's important. Besides it just being something we have to do, what's it going to do to benefit the students on your campus? So an example is, when I go to present mine, I'm going to start something this year, since last year we weren't in person, and we're going to play principal tag on my campus. Once a quarter, I will tag every employee out of their position. So I will tag teachers and give them that time to let me be with their students, and they'll get to go and observe others in the classroom. I'm going to tag out the custodian during lunchtime and do the custodial job while my custodian gets to go and observe. I'm going to tag out my counselor. I'm going to tag out my attendance tag. I plan, and I am at a smaller site, but I am going to play principal tag, just so they start to see me, that I can see their role and what they embrace every day, but that they can start to see what else is happening on our campus. So I want you to start thinking about, how might you present this? If you are an AP, I know you'll be working with your principal of how this means, but you can also start to think about, how was this presented to you when you were a teacher? Was it just simply, hey, go and watch this video, tell me that you did it and move on? Or did you have small conversations? Did you meet with departments? Did you meet with grade levels? So take a moment and just start to jot down, what are your notes? What are your thoughts and feelings? What do you want to make sure comes out of it when you present performance management at your site? Take a couple minutes for yourself to think about your own role and your own work at your site. All right, so you've talked about, or you've started to write down how you might introduce it to your site, start to set them up for success. The next thing you'll have to think about is, how are you going to work on monitoring, feedback, and coaching? How will that be implemented at your site in your own work? And that will be different for each of you. If you're an administrator, if you're an AP on this call, then you will be working with your entire admin team. If you're a principal that doesn't have another administrator on your campus, maybe you are working with your CSP or maybe another teacher coach on your campus. But how are you going to make sure that teachers are monitored, receive feedback, and the coaching they deserve to help make that performance management successful and a continuous conversation on your campus? So take a moment, again, I'll give you 2 minutes to jot down some more ideas about what monitoring, coaching, and feedback might look like for you at your site and for your teachers. And so there's one last piece of that performance management cycle. We've talked about introducing it and defining those expectations, monitoring, feedback, and coaching. And so the last thing I'm going to ask you to think about is, what systems might you have in place to collect that evidence? So now, how do you want to collect the evidence? Do you maybe want to have a walkthrough form? Do you, some principals I know do everything electronically, and maybe it's a Google Doc or a Microsoft form, but what systems are you thinking about, or do you have questions about? So if you're an AP on this call, you might be writing down questions that you want to walk away from this training with and go and bug your principal. Don't tell them Patty Hurley sent you to bug them, but what is already in place at your campus? If you're new to a campus, you might figure out what's been done in the past that teachers seem to connect with, or what they definitely didn't want to connect with and you'd want to change. So again, take a couple minutes to jot down ideas for yourself and your work at your site, knowing what your site does or needs to work on. Now to talk about where does it say it in our board policy and teacher consensus? What does it say about evaluation? And so I do not say that I have memorized every article in the teacher's consensus or in any employee agreements, but definitely want to make sure we understand where does it talk about evaluation. So Article 13 in our certified teacher TEA consensus does talk about evaluation. It's important that you know that, because teachers will use governing board policy and their consensus to have conversations with you if they're not in agreement with something you are doing. So again, please, on your own time, make sure that you review that part. This just simply states again that the procedure is to evaluate the progress and success of our certified staff. And I really actually like that it says it evaluates the progress and success, because again, it shouldn't be a negative thing. It should be a positive and a growth conversation when we talk about evaluation. The other thing that is in the consensus is about when we must, as administrators, talk about evaluation with our teachers. And so that you will see here that a conversation about the evaluation and the orientation of how that will look must happen before the first teaching day of each school year. So that is why we say either August 2nd, 3rd, or 4th this year, you must have time in there to talk about evaluation. They need to have that done before August 5th. So please, if you're gonna put anything off in your PDs next week, don't put off talking about evaluation. It's that time that you start to cultivate those attitudes with your teachers right from the start. I also just want to bring to mind that what does it say in our governing board policy? So a governing board policy, GCO, and again, I promise you, I do not have governing board policies memorized, but definitely when it talks about personnel, which I believe is mostly governing board policy section G, it also talks about the process for evaluation. And in just a moment, I'm going to put a link to the policies and ask you to go in. I'm not necessarily going to have you do what it says on the screen, but I'm going to have you actually skim and scan this board policy just so you start to understand the language that's written in there. Because once again, teachers know this language, and if they're not in agreement with you, they'll bring it to your attention very quickly. So what does it say in that governing board policy? You'll see that it talks about not only the evaluation, but it also lays out steps that have to happen if we are engaging our teachers in a performance improvement conversation, if we are trying to put them on a support plan. There are teachers who definitely fall into the category of needing to be placed on a support plan, but I encourage you to know what it says in governing board policy before we start to put them on that support plan. As a mentor and a PDAT, I would be assigned those teachers who got put on support plans. And often I talk to the principal and they would tell me, oh, I haven't told the teacher why they're on their support plan. Well, that's not a good start. So a teacher who gets put on the support plan should be on the same page as the principal as to what that plan is about and how they're going to work together to get there. So what I'm going to do in the chat right now is put, let's see, it should work. I just put a link to our governing board policies, and I would like you to open at that link if you're able to, and look for Governing Board Policy GCO. And take a few moments to just skim and scan through it to just see the language that's there around evaluation and performance improvement.
And just reading the definitions in section A about performance improvement conversations. So they're specifically they're verbal conversations that we have with our folks. Is this in supplement to a formal observation? Like say if you were to do what some folks might call a drop-in, and then you notice deficiencies, then you have this conversation, and then it looks like if you follow down into B, subsection 9, Roman numeral 9, then you have to do a written follow-up via email after that conversation. Is that correct?
Right. So so there are times, and this could go for any employee, right? Even though it's currently written under certified, but if an employee is not doing something that they should be doing, oftentimes there is those quick hallway conversations or private hallway conversations or in the classroom. I was trained early as an administrator. That's a good habit to go right back to your computer and say, just to summarize our conversation. And I actually titled any of those emails Performance Improvement Conversation Summary. So then if I have to place that teacher on a support plan or start to have a paper trail for whatever conduct or behavior any employee is doing that they shouldn't be doing, I now can then go back and say on September 11th, we had a performance improvement conversation. We had a second one on October 2nd, resulting in your behavior is not changing, and then it just gives you as the administrator that support as to why they need to move forward onto that support plan. I've had to talk to somebody about attendance. The first time I talked to them, did I necessarily call that a performance improvement conversation? No, but the next time I had to talk to them, I would actually say, just so you know, I'm going to call this time our conversation a performance improvement conversation. So it didn't, but every small little conversation I've had with a teacher, no, I have not documented all those little verbal ones, unless I'm moving towards, I've got to see some changes. I've got to do something more better as an evaluator or supervisor with you to support you. And always in that email, I would say, please let me know if I've missed something and what support I can offer. Always, always, always. So it never showed that that email was like another point to put them down. Does that help?
I appreciate the clarification. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So again, this point is to just remind you that we know we have to evaluate, but it's important you understand what policies and protocols are in place in consensus and in district policy, so that as administrators, we're following all those correct steps. Otherwise, they'll remind you if you're not. So as we start to kind of tie a bow on performance management and get ready to move into Danielson, I can't speak like Grant Wiggins, and I want you though to read silently to yourself just his final quote here. So I think we all know that our plates are full as an administrator, and taking that extra time sometimes to quickly write a Post-it note and leave it on the teacher's desk when we're in their room, or to get back to our office and remember to send 3 emails because we just saw 3 teachers. It is hard sometimes to say, well, I just don't have time, or you get called out because there's a 1031 happening or whatever it might be. But if you plan to take the time to give that feedback, I really do think your teachers will show that appreciation, and you should see some attitudes about evaluations with them change. It also models what we want them to do with our students, is take that time to give feedback, to discuss the data, and again, to lead to that continual cycle of growth and not just a one-time event. You can take a picture of this slide if you want. And this PowerPoint will be available after the training. I do want you to know though, when you need to reach out and are thinking, well, I have no idea what Patty told us in July, because that was my 7th day of training in a row and my brain was full. But what can we use as resources within our evaluation besides just the evaluation tool? These are resources you have. My favorite one on here is colleagues. Please, please, please reach out to buddies. You're going to hear when I talk to you about taking the test. Although everyone has to take the test individual, I will say form a buddy if you want to have a study buddy. You can always contact me, but there's plenty of resources in our district of what you can go back to when working on those evaluations. Although I'm not going to talk about other staff, and I feel guilty to call it that, but I should say non-certified staff instead of other staff. I do want you to know you do have to evaluate everyone on your campus. And if you're an AP, you're probably assigned certain staff to evaluate besides certified teachers, but your classified staff will be evaluated through a tool called True North Logic. And even though I'm not going to be going over that today, I just want you to know that. I also put on here the articles for each of the employee agreements where it discusses their evaluation and their bargaining agreement and their consensus. So I just put that there. It's kind of nice to know where do I need to go instead of having to read through everything if I'm having to discuss evaluation. So if you want to snap a photo of the screen or write it down really quickly, I just like to tell you where people are located. All right. So let's talk about, and we're going to take a break in just a moment because I know I've had you sitting and staring at a screen for a pretty long time. But this is important to know, well, what is the workflow? What is expected of me as an administrator? When do I have to get all this stuff done? By the end of the first quarter, you will have to hold with each of your certified staff that you're responsible for evaluating a beginning of the year conference and a pre-conference. That's by the end of the first quarter, which is October 8th is Friday grading day. So what does beginning of the year and a pre-conference mean? So beginning of the year, many administrators in our district use that beginning of the year conference. They use that date when they do an overview with everybody starting next week in those first 3 days. But what you will have to do in Frontline is you will have to put what date you had that conversation. And you will have to say, it asks you what date. And the second question it asks you is, did the conversation really happen? And you will, of course, mark yes. But just know that most administrators will say the beginning of the year conversation, they do it as a whole group. The pre-conference is what you will have with individual teachers. In a perfect world, you'll do your pre-conference just a few days before you have planned to go in and formally observe them. Speaking from experience, my pre-conferences were never just 3 days before I observe them. Sometimes it was a month out. So, but know that you have to document that. Okay, so beginning of the year conference, pre-conference before October 8th. Hopefully you're marking that down. The next thing that has to happen is your teachers will have to conduct a self-review. There's 22 components and they have to go in and score themselves. You will have to, even though our teachers do this every year, you will have to remind them. They're to complete that by December 1st. I will tell all of you on this call that on December 2nd at midnight, it does not mean they're not allowed to access it anymore and complete it after December 1st, but they really are supposed to complete it by December 1st. Me personally, I encourage my teachers to complete it before I have my post-observation conference with them so that I can look at where they scored themselves and where our data shows that they actually land. So it has to be by December 1st. However, I strongly encourage my teachers to have it completed before or by the time that we meet for their post-observation conference, because it works great. You're bringing in where they assess themselves and what the data shows. Next, by December 1st, you have to have completed your formal observation of your certified staff. So by December 1st. And I know that seems a long time away from now, but it's 4 months from Sunday. So by December 1st. When we look at the rubric, you'll see that we get points, and I'll explain that. But if a teacher scores less than 30 points on what we will observe them on, they will schedule a second observation. If they score more than 30 points, they do not need a second observation. Okay. If your teacher has to have a second observation, just know that has to occur by May 1st. So December 1st, first observation. If they have to have a subsequent observation, it's May 1st. When you do observe them, your post-conference with them is to be held within 10 school days. So if you observe them right before Thanksgiving break, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving break, you don't count Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving as 2 of those days, and you don't count weekends. All right. So I'm trying to give you guys the important dates that you need. By October 8th, you'll do a beginning of the year conference and the pre-conference. By December 1st, you will have observed them. And then usually it's about by December 15th, you will have done their post observations. I will tell you right now, things happen. So as long as it's scheduled and you've communicated with your teacher that you needed to change something, most teachers are okay with it. But I would warn you, if you have a teacher you think is going to need a second observation, you have a teacher who's moving towards a support plan, I wouldn't miss any of these deadlines. Because if you do, they're going to use it against you. So if I had a teacher who wasn't very effective when I observed them, I'm going to make sure their post-conference is definitely within those 10 days. Okay. I'm just trying to be real with you guys. Again, their second post-conference, there has to be 10 days. And then ultimately by May 15th, you will have had to score them in all 4 domains. And I'll show you what that looks like. So right now you should have those important dates written down. I'm going to stop right here and ask if there's any questions. I don't see any in the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So with a new teacher, I used to always do informal observations before the formal.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the veteran teachers, I mean, you know, I guess it was just the one formal was all that was required if they've been there. So is that true with TUSD?
Yeah, so everybody, no matter if they're a new teacher or a veteran teacher, only needs to have officially that one formal eval. But as we've encouraged everybody on this call today, you should have some system in place where you are seeing them way before just that first formal eval. So whether you're doing it in walkthroughs, whether you have informal evals, maybe you ask the teacher, do you want to, you know, I've had teachers say to me, can we do a dry run? Can you come in and observe this and give me some feedback as to where I would land? But yes, you definitely want to make sure you've been in teachers' classrooms before that official first formal. And when we get into what frontline looks like, I will do my best to give you guys some tips I've done with a teacher, especially if they're going to fall behind that 30 points, but only because of one component. You have some options as the principal, as the administrator, you can make that choice. Maybe I want to work with them and ask them to invite me back in before December 1st and see if they can't get that one component up. And save them a whole nother formal eval, which also saves you a little time of a whole nother formal eval. I believe Katie had her hand up.
If you do, like the way I had set up our observations here is Barrett and I were going to flip in December so that the teachers got 2 perspectives of observations.
Mm-hmm.
But if I do the first observation and they get below 30 points, does that mean I need to do the second observation, or could we flip it?
It really should be you, so it's the same observer. But if you and Barrett have calibrated, and if you know, it's up to you, you're the principal, but you can ask the teacher for your second observation, would you like it to be the other administrator or would you like it to be me? or maybe she wants both of you to go in together. Or
Okay.
he wants both of you, but I would suggest it just be, be the same so that you've already had a conversation with them, and that post conversation, maybe what you told them to work on. But again, I would leave that up to you as the administrator and make that decision, and then maybe involve the teacher in that decision.
Okay. All right. That helps. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We're going to get into now the meat, the Danielson, which you probably were like, why didn't we start this in the beginning? But I had to do that first part. So introduction to Danielson. Please know that the next slides I go over that are about Danielson had to be approved by Charlotte Danielson. So she is pretty hands-on in how her training of her framework of the teaching works. Her own Danielson trainers definitely shared with us and how to work with us in the district. Those of you who took the training, I think it was Katie who maybe said it felt like that training took all year. I was behind having to design all of that, so I'm sorry. But this is what I'll go over. There are some assigned readings and things based on really the group and where some of you land in your experience with Danielson. I will assign some of it as just asynchronous for you, so that after we get through this Danielson, we'll move into Teachscape and get into how do I pass that test, Patty Hurley. So when we first start thinking about teaching, what Charlotte Danielson loved to talk about was what do others say about teachers? And so in her trainings, she first brings in Stephen Frears, who's a film director. And I am going to ask somebody on this call to unmute themselves and read their quote for us.
I know it seems crazy when everyone else in the world wants to be a film director, but for me, teaching is one of the few heroic jobs left. All the biggest miracles take place in the classroom. Nothing happens without teachers.
So it's a great quote. You're welcome to steal this to remind your teachers next week if you want to. But just nice to hear somebody who is not in the education world talk about the heroic tasks that we know our teachers endure every day, especially after a year like last year. Now let's see Lee Schulman, what he has to say about teaching. And I'm going to ask if somebody else will bring his voice into the room.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Teaching is perhaps the most complex, most challenging, and most demanding, subtle, nuanced, and frightening activity that our species has ever invented. The only time a physician could possibly encounter a situation of comparable complexity would be in the emergency room of a hospital during a natural disaster.
Another way, and I think we could also just put administration in there, right? And replace the word teaching with administration. Things are getting thrown at us. Any of you who were in admin roles last year or in a teaching role last year, things were thrown at us at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and then changed by 5:15 and then rearranged at 6 o'clock. And by the time you woke up the next morning, there was a different task. And so we know that teachers make 5,000 plus decisions a day. And it's important we keep that in mind when we're working with them and evaluating them, because maybe the day we go in to evaluate them, they had to make a decision or a task they've never been faced with before. And so it's important we're able to have that conversation that they feel comfortable to say, possibly, can we reschedule, or let me tell you what's going on, and to maybe why there's a frown on my face when you walked into the room. Oops, sorry. All right, so I want you to put your observer hat on. If you were to walk into a classroom, what might you see or hear from either the students or the teacher that causes you to think, you know what, I'm in the room of an expert teacher, or I'm in a room with a teacher who I would want my child to be sitting in a desk. And if you have some scrap paper by you, or it's okay if you don't, but if you had little Post-it notes, I just want you to write down like at least 4 things. What would you see or hear in a classroom that says, yep, this teacher has it going on? All right, so here's the next thing I want you to do. If you put it on, if you put an idea down on Post-it notes and you're able to move them around, I want you to actually stick the Post-it note to which domain you think what you wrote falls under. If you just wrote them down as a list, check out the 4 domain titles and then just put a 1, 2, 3, or 4 next to what you wrote down. Then what I'd like you to do in the chat is just write which domains do most of what you wrote down fall into. So if they fell into 1, you're going to put a number 1. If they fell into 2 and 3, you put 2 and 3. But just put it in the chat. 3 and 2, 2 and 3, 2, 2, 2, 2 and 3. I sound like a dentist who's checking your gums. 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3. Thank you for laughing, Omar.
I just had those. And those are
I
good
know,
numbers.
right? They go 2, 2,
numbers.
3. I want to know how they know which teeth they're at. Kirsten could tell us more. Her dad's a dentist. All right. So as you can see, we're seeing a lot of 2s and 3s, which makes sense because the way that the Danielson rubric and the framework is set up is that domain 2 and 3 are observable behaviors, are observable components. Those are the 2 domains that you will be evaluating when you physically go in to do the observation. And domains 1 and 4 are the offstage domains, the things that have to happen before the teacher is actually presenting it in the room. So nice work. So let's look a little bit closer at the actual framework. And you can have your smart card out, but domain 1 is planning and preparation. You'll see that there are 7 components under there. Domain 2 is all about the classroom observation. There's 6 components. Domain 3 is all about instruction, 6 components. And domain 4 is all about professional responsibilities. So the framework starts by having 4 domains. Underneath each domain, you find the components. And then you'll see that my screen just turned green. The 2 components that are green, domain 2 and 3, is what Charlotte Danielson calls our on-stage components, our on-stage domains. That is what you will evaluate and score your teachers in for their formal eval. So when you meet with a teacher, you'll be giving them a score for 2A through 2E and 3A through 3E. Domains 1 and 4, you will not be asked to give them those scores until the springtime. Those are considered off-stage domains and components. That talks about their planning. That takes a little more time. You need to ask them to provide some evidence to help you with that score. And I'll give you some tips and tricks about when they could provide you that evidence. Okay. So again, you heard me kind of say these words. You don't have to memorize this. This part's not on the test, but there's 4 domains, 22 components, and then 76 elements. So if you look at your smart card, under each component, you'll see little bullets. And you'll notice those bullets, if you counted them, you don't have to, there's 76 of them known as elements. So if we take domain 3 as instruction, look at look at component 3C, and you'll see that's engaging students in the learning. And then there are elements underneath that, the grouping of students, the structure and pacing, the instructional materials and resources. And so that is important to have that conversation. I will tell you, almost always when I do my post-conference, I have this smart card on my desk, on my table. So if we're talking and a teacher says, what is that one again? Or I don't really remember, I can just have this out as a reference because all of your teachers have received a smart card. Okay, all of your teachers get a Danielson training and an intro to the framework in their new teacher induction courses. So they know it, but you're going to have to remind them because just like you, they get a lot thrown at them in their induction. Don't tell my friends who are doing the induction that I said that. Usually at this time, I would have you break into groups and do a jigsaw. For the essence of time and to get us more into Teachscape, I'm going to skip this part. But I do think these domains are pretty easy to remember. I would just encourage you, if there's one you want to know more about, you can look into the resources we've offered you or even go right into the book. For the test, you will only focus on domains 2 and 3. There will be no questions on the test that are about domains 1 and 4 at all. Okay, so we cut it in half for you. Well, I didn't do it, Teachscape did it. All right, I want you to test our knowledge with a little quick quiz. So in your packet, I believe it's on page 6. I'm hoping it hasn't changed the numbers, but you should have a title that says domain quiz. Do you have that? It's the packet that is titled Enhancing Professional Practice. What I'd like you to do when you find it is I want you to just do every other one. So I'm gonna let you choose. If you rather start with A, I want you to do A, C, E, G, I, and K. But if you wanna be different and start with the letter B, then I want you to do B, D, F, and so on. And what you're gonna do is read the statement. For instance, the first statement says, the desk in Mr. T's second grade classroom are arranged in groups of 4. A couch and beanbag chairs are provided for students in the reading corner. I want you then to think, which domain would that fall under? Is that about classroom environment, instruction, professional responsibilities, or planning and preparation? So go ahead and give yourself the domain quiz. Are you ready for the answers? I see a few nods. And again, it's okay. I'm not going to ask you to tell me how many you got correct. This is just for you to do a review. So A is 2, B is 4, and then C is 3, D is 2, E is 4, F is 1, G is 3, H is 4, I is 1, and J, K, and L are all 3. As you review your own, are there any that you had a question about? I don't see
I
any.
do. Letter
Okay, go ahead.
L.
L.
Maybe I just took it too literally when I would see Mrs. E plans.
Oh,
And the activity, that's planning and preparation. So that's domain 1, isn't it?
yes, and I read it incorrectly. I'm sorry. It is a 1 on my paper. Thank you for that.
No problem. Just
will
making
tell
sure I
you-
read it correctly.
I will tell you that I gave this to my teachers because they probably have not been questioned about Danielson since the first time it was introduced into the district. And so if you want to, this is a way to just get their brains pumping around Danielson and help remind them that they are evaluated in the 4 domains total. And you can help remind them as they look at this, the examples that are for domains 2 and 3, you can tell why they're observable in the classroom. And the examples for 1 and 4, you can tell how that's the planning and what happens outside of classroom time. So it's up to you, but that's just another resource if you want to have something of where you can jumpstart that conversation, reminding teachers of what encompasses their whole evaluation framework. All right, so
I have one question real quick, Patty. When you're looking at I, it is the reason it's domain 1 is because they're talking about what he designed and not because you observed it?
correct. So if you were in his classroom and Mr. B was reviewing the rubric with the students and discussing what type of work would get them where on the rubric, that actually would fall in domain 2 with a culture of learning. So for 2B, where students know what they have to do, what are those expectations, and how much pride they show in their work as to where they would land on that rubric.
It wouldn't be 3D using assessment and instruction if you observed it?
Well, if it depends how he's using it. So if he's just reviewing it with the teachers, or I mean with the students, right? 3D would be if he is using it. So using it to have a conversation with the students about them, having them do some peer assessments. That often happens sometimes, especially if we think about a writing rubric or any project rubric. Have your students, your peers look at it and see where you land.
So then when we're looking at taking the quiz, the keywords we're looking at are planning, designing, things that are more before the lesson. And then
Right.
on the, so when they're at, because I'm taking it that these are the kind of questions we're going to be answering on the quiz.
Right, so your questions will only be around domains 2 and 3. So it will be very concrete that they're looking at something that was observable.
Yeah, because I mean, I was pretty good at the 2s and 3s, but the 1s and 4s, I guess it depends on when you look at it.
Mhm. And it's kind of the language. Now, when we were trained by the Danielson group, they definitely said everything only falls into one component. And I like to say that might be theory, but in practicality and in conversation with teachers, I have put some evidence in multiple components. Does that help, Katie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
No,
So,
thank you. Yes.
the way that, because we had to do everything online,
Mhm.
and so we had to see how the outcomes were going to come out. And so there was a ways the teachers could check in the background, using Nearpod or using, they had to put in answers into a slide, the students did, or they had to put something into a cell in a spreadsheet. And so we were able to look at outcomes, which was actually, observable.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm having the same dilemma that you just covered it, in that some of them overlap because you can observe some things in domains 1 and 4 in the classroom, actually.
Right. And so we're going to talk about when we're observing, you are going to need to script everything the teacher says. And so it really is what simply did we observe? If they are reviewing that assessment data in the room, then obviously it's going to fall into domain and component 3D more than the planning. If you attend a PLC and you see them planning a lesson together, you would then be able to gather evidence for domain 1. So it's really going to be on that language. I don't think too many teachers, though, know the rubric well enough to really strike on that specific language. That's going to be your role as the administrator and how you converse about it. Does that help? Okay. All right. So common themes. I kind of mentioned this when I went over the materials, but if you take a look at your smart card a moment, you can become friends with this smart card. So I just want you to think about, pick one theme that just appeared on the screen. Pick one, whichever one you want to pick that speaks to you. And then look for that word on your smart card. So whatever theme you picked, look to see if it's on your smart card. And so I'm going to kind of guess that you probably don't find that exact word anywhere on your smart card. You don't maybe even see appropriate use of technology somewhere there. And that is because when Charlotte Danielson just created this framework, she believes that these themes run throughout. She believes that cultural competence is in all 4 domains. It doesn't land in just one domain or in one component. And so what we've done is given you a handout about the common themes. Usually right now, I would have us only focus on equity and cultural competence because that does speak to the work of our district and the USP. But what I'd like you to do is whichever theme spoke out to you for whatever reason, I'd like you to find that excerpt in here, and it won't be more than a couple of paragraphs. And I just want you to read what Charlotte Danielson writes about how that theme is weaved throughout the framework. So if you picked attention to individual students, I'd like you to find that and then read it. And again, it's in the handout. Sorry that so many of them were in the same color, but it's a handout that at the top says common themes. Welcome back. I think you all came back at once. All right. I would like to ask, was there something that was shared in your group that you feel would be for the good of the whole as we think about the common themes that run throughout the framework?
I was in a group with Terry, and we actually both picked the same reading, which is the individual students and the attention to the individual students. And it was just really interesting, the two different perspectives that we took on the reading from Danielson. And he took it more of the specific domains and kind of where it falls and lands. And I said, Terry, I really appreciate that because you're already looking at it through the lens of an administrator. So taking that information, I kind of just read it for what we're actually looking for through the students, for the teacher's lens, and where we would see that, and knowing that Charlotte Danielson placed it into the evaluation tool, but knowing it's in all the domains, and just knowing that, you know, it's specific to the needs of the students. Yes, all students, but then specific to those needs, whether they have physical limitations or verbal, and taking it from that perspective.
Excellent. Thank you. Sounds like a good conversation. You'll see when we get into levels of performance, as they move up in levels, where it really talks about that attention to individual students and their individual needs. And it's a great conversation starter with our teachers who think they're meeting all those individual needs. Thank you. Is there somebody else who'd like to share just an aha or something that you think would be helpful to all who are on this call?
But it made me think, you know, listening to my group about an experience I had. And now the way things are, you know, with the new laws that the legislature came out with. And, you know, because I looked at cultural competency. And so the school district that I was at before was a Native American school district. And we were interviewing a teacher, and she was coming from the Midwest, and she was at a Christian school. And so she, you know, we asked her to do a lesson, and she did it it was on Manifest Destiny. And so she's talking about, you know, that the reason Manifest Destiny occurred was because American leaders wanted to increase democracy, spread democracy, and that the land was uninhabited, and that you know, it was all these you know, all these resources that were available that weren't being used. And, you know, my staff, you know, was all Native American, and we're like, what? You know, is really culturally, she was really off. But now with those laws that come in, we didn't hire her, but with those laws that are in now, that would be what I think they would want us to teach, even though it's not accurate, because the land was occupied. And democracy, I'm sure if you ask Native Americans who were forced onto reservations, well, that's not democracy. You know, so it just really, the contrast for that from the conversation that I was just listening to was like, whoa, you know, this is, depending on how they go after it, it could, you know, even if they're in the standards in there, and even if it's in Danielson, there may be people that complain about it. So I'm just like, wow, I hadn't even really thought about it to that depth until right now.
Thank you for that. And that just brings about how important it is our teachers, just like we need to get to know our staff and have those relationships with them and understand their perspective on things and where they're coming from and prior experiences. We ask our teachers to do that with our students. I just think of different conversations I've had with parents. The teacher never had that intention to make a student feel a certain way, but just the conversation that led into the classroom led that parent to my office to want to, you know, talk about what this teacher was teaching or how it was teaching. And so that's just very, very important of that perspective and how it comes off. And so with that, I want to move into levels of performance. I will say usually Charlotte Danielson likes to define those levels for you in a video she says we have to show. But due to all the glitches in our district, if I click on the link or try to show it to you from the file, it doesn't work. So we're going to pretend that Charlotte Danielson has just talked to you about the levels of performance. Know that there are 4 levels of performance. Because we are unique, I will tell you the 4 levels of Danielson, they do correlate to what's shown on Frontline, but the language around them are different, or the titles, and I'll tell you what those are. So I'm not going to have you do this part. sorry. But in the 4 levels of, for each domain, they're all the same across. But for Danielson, it is unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. You can see them after your domain quiz you took that on page 6. If you look at page 7, it's just a blank title that says evaluation instrument. We're in that note-taking packet. But after that, you will see the 4 domains, and you will see the 4 performance levels for the entire domain across. So you can see 1A, and then what it looks like to see unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished all the way across. Can you guys see that in your packets? Yes, on the screen I have what domain 2 looks like. All right, here's what I want you to do. Pick one domain and one component. I would encourage you to pick something in domain 2 or 3, since that's what that Danielson test is going to be on. But just pick one domain and one component and read across. Read across through the 4 performance levels and look for differences in the language that's used. So like one might say absent of or minimal, inconsistent, but just pick one domain, one component, and read across the 4 levels. Here's the keywords that Danielson tells us is throughout all of proficient. No matter the component, you will see these common words: successful, appropriate, some of the same words all of you brought. I encourage you, when you're talking with your teachers, if they fall into this category, you use those same words so that they understand why they fall into that category. They are able to almost speak to the rubric just like you are. All right, Danielson has us start with proficient because the goal is that all our certified staff at minimum lies in proficient. All right, I will tell you the wording that is used, the title of the category used when we get into our teacher eval for the district, instead of proficient, the word effective is used. So proficient and effective, same category. So what did Danielson come up with? Some of the same words you did: minimal, attempts. The biggest one is inconsistent. So when you have a teacher who says to you, and for our district, they do call it developing instead of basic, but they'll say, why am I developing? Well, you implement a lot of classroom behavior strategies, but you're not consistent with them, or they seem to have minimal impact. That's why that teacher lands in developing or in basic. The words that Danielson says she uses are lack of, unsafe, harmful, unclear. That teacher definitely is most likely been through the 11 steps to be put on a teacher plan, and you're having many one-on-one conversations. But you can definitely, just by looking at the 3 categories that are on the screen right now, see the differences, right? So, and you know, all of us come into a classroom, whether we want to admit it or not, with a bias. And so we need to make sure when we are observing those teachers, we put our bias aside and truly observe for what is happening. What do we see happening? And then if you're putting somebody in the unsatisfactory category, you're going to want to make sure your evidence is there for that. Let's see what Danielson tells us. I feel like saying survey says. All right, so the things that came from Charlotte Danielson: solid, seamless. This is the classroom you walk into, and it's where the magic is happening, right? Students are leading a Socratic seminar maybe, and the teacher is simply not even in the circle, truly able to be that observer. It takes time to get to distinguished. It's okay to remind our teachers they're not always going to live in the distinguished category. And you're going to have teachers fight you on that. So the best thing to give back to those teachers is say, you know what? You can get distinguished as long as we have the evidence for whatever component you believe we need to be distinguished in. Let's get us to the evidence. As long as we have the evidence, the 4s can be there. Let me just tell you, some of you have written the levels of performance. I just want to review how they will look on the teacher evaluation for our district. Instead of unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished, ineffective, developing, effective, highly effective. Something else that's important to look at when we look at the rubric is basic or developing is what Charlotte Danielson says is when the whole class is being taught to the whole time. So if it's the teacher in front of the room, working with the whole class the whole time, they never break up into small groups. It is just one whole class. According to Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching, that is considered basic or developing. When there are groups, different student groups, they break up into lab groups, whatever that might be, Charlotte Danielson says that is more proficient or effective. And then when there's a lot of individual, so when the individuals are able to be working on something on their own, so student choice is in the room, not everybody has to be completing the same poster assignment. So they could be working on the same poster assignment and in groups, that would be considered effective. But if there's been given student choice and students you can walk in and see that some kids are showing what they know by creating something on the computer, other kids are writing an essay about it, whatever that might be, that is considered distinguished. The other thing is, and this is really important to review and just remind your teachers, it comes from the Danielson framework. When it's more teacher directed, which is not a bad thing. We want our teachers to be in charge in the classroom. That is considered to fall under the proficient or effective category. And I'm sure you can guess what it's going to say for distinguished. When it's more student-led success, that puts us into the distinguished category. So again, if they want to say that they are a 4 in all 24 components, I can tell you in domain 4, one of the components is about maintaining accurate records. To be in a 4, it has to show, it'd be like almost like the students know more about the grade book than the teacher, that the students are completely involved in all data collection, are able to talk about it in parent conferences. They can run their either teacher-parent led conversations. That may not happen, and it's okay. A teacher does not need to receive 22 4s to get the highest amount of money available to them for their teacher evaluation. And the teachers know that part of their 301 money comes from whatever score they get on their evaluation. So no, as an administrator on this call, that's really what they want. They want the money, but it doesn't need to be all 4s. And so that's where you will craft your conversation as to how you work on cultivating that attitude around teacher growth. There's always something we can grow in that again promotes student success. Thank you, Rickiana, for showing that model. So if you open that up, it gives you a lot more information about every single component. It will tell you not only what does it look like at all 4 performance levels, but underneath it will also give you critical attributes and examples. So I get used to using that. You'll need it to take the test. It will become your buddy during the test. But use that as a teaching tool for yourself when you're working with your staff and they're saying to you, well, what is an example? I don't expect you to memorize all 22 components and what an example is in each one. Use that as a resource. When we get into Frontline, I'll show you where we have other critical attributes that you will get to use. If you remember last week in our CRPI training, there are critical attributes our district has added to help support that culturally responsive teaching. Use that to your advantage. I'd share that with your teachers. They want to know, what does it take to be distinguished or to stay in that effective category, it doesn't hurt us to give them the attributes. Okay, please know when you take the test, Danielson and Teachscape are not going to test us on culturally responsive. So when you're watching a video and have to score them, don't score them because you might not be seeing something that's exactly written for the TUSD framework. Okay, so please keep that in mind. It's unfortunate, but I didn't create the test. All right, I am not going to do this reading with us, but this is something I want you to know and use it as your own asynchronous learning if you feel you need it. The big importance about this framework is that no component really interacts by itself. It doesn't stand alone. 3C and 1E are a great example. So if you'll take out your smart card, look at 3C and 1E, and look at the elements, the little small bullets underneath. And you should identify that the elements underneath are almost identical. Am I correct? So again, you're looking at 1E and 3C. So you're going to want to notice how they are similar. And I'm sorry, I have a. So on this slide, you can see learning activities is in 1E. I have to, as a teacher, plan for those. In 3C, I'm implementing my plan. I have to plan what instructional materials and resources I need for my lessons. In 3C, I have to provide them and implement them. Instructional groups, I have to plan for them. In 3C, I'm going to see that they were grouping of students. It's a great question to ask our teachers. Why did you group them in the way you did? How did your groups come to be? And then the unit structure and lesson structure goes right along with structure and pacing. So the important thing to know and what that reading really is about is how Charlotte Danielson really connects what they plan for in domain 1 and how it comes to life in domain 2 and 3 in the classroom. All right, so we're about to get looking into how this looks in our district and jump into that thing called Teachscape. It's not scary, I promise you. But I want you to take a moment of reflection and thinking about your role as an evaluator, whether you're on a campus site or in a department. Think about your strengths and opportunities for how you can increase the knowledge of the framework with your teachers. And what's 1 or 2 steps you want to take in this review that you're like, I need to study this more before I talk to my teachers. So just take down a couple of notes for yourself. And you could write how you're feeling, however you want to impact your work. Take a moment for reflection. Thank you. Remember, as you're working with your teachers on their professional growth, please don't forget to work on your own and always take that time to reflect. And it is okay to not know everything and to know we all have room to grow. Okay. Every time I do this training, I actually do write my own 2 notes of what I want to work on. And so thank you. All right. So what do we need to do to pass this wonderful exam everybody talks to you about? I promise you I'm going to get you there. Here's what I need you to try for me. All of you should have been added to Teachscape and given an account. I do not know if they send you an email though. So what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. All right, are you able to see my Teachscape login screen? Yes. All right, I would like you to go here. And the way you get there is please don't just write teachscape.com. You want to write the word login first. So login.teachscape.com. And then your screen should look similar to mine. So please attempt that now. Can you guys show me if a thumbs up if you're there? So I know. All right. So most of you probably have not logged into this before, activated your account. It's your first time. So what I'm going to need you to do is then to click on this button at the bottom or right in the middle of your screen that says activate your account. It then is going to ask you, put in your TUSD email and hit submit. And then you should get an email from TeachScape.
It's telling me mine is an invalid email address.
Okay, if it is giving you that, that might mean that they haven't put you in yet. And Rashonda, I don't know if you were added late last night to the training. And so that might be why, but we'll get you in.
Okay.
Is there anybody else? It's okay if you're not in for this training right now. I just want to make sure people are knowing how to access it. So this is where you're going to come to do some training, to do the modules, and to ultimately take the test. So I am going to log in and kind of show you how we get through it. All right, so when you log in, when you get to finally log in, you should also have this focus tab. If you do not, you need to email me and let me know so that I can talk to who needs to be spoken with to make sure you have the correct access, because this is where you'll go to do any practice and then to ultimately take your test. So what does focus have for you? And just so you know, I know in a few minutes we'll go to lunch, and when we come back from lunch, we're going to do a lot of playing in here. So please don't worry. It's always going to ask you about a system check. All of our laptops should be good to go, but it will always ask you about it. I just simply hit OK. So what you see at the top, there's an overview. We won't spend a lot of time there. Training is where we will spend some time. Practice is full of videos where you get to practice before taking the test. I've taken the assessment, so I can't show you that tab, but when you are ready and feel ready to take the test, you'll go to assessment, and it's very easy. It will say, this test will start. I'm going to tell you, it may say it could take up to 3 hours. It probably won't take you 3 hours, but it does tell you that. You can't start the test, stop it, and go back to it. So know whenever you go to take the test, make sure you grabbed a water bottle and that you're ready to sit and be there for the duration. And then you do not have to worry about calibration. So really, it's just training, practice, and assessment. On the training tab, there is, if I added them up, almost close to about 40 hours of training. You do not need to sit through all 40 hours, okay? What I'm going to do today, right when we come back from lunch, we're gonna start off lunch, we're gonna start right after lunch with watching a video. We're gonna simply watch what a TeachScape video looks like, and I'm gonna have you score that teacher in 8 components. Those 8 components are 2A through 2D and 3A through 3D, because those are the only 8 components you will score on the test. They're the only 8 components you'll be asked about on the test. And then what I'm going to encourage you to do is when you score them, you kind of give yourself your own baseline assessment. We will get to compare your score with the TeachScape master score. And then let's say for 2D, you do not score as well. That's where there's a lot of discrepancy between what you gave the teacher and what TeachScape master teacher gives the teacher. I would say then, well, go and look at the module for just 2D and see where maybe you're missing the point. All right, so please know, I know it says there's lots of hours next to each of these modules. You are not directed to have to go and watch every single one. You really are going to use that based on where you assess yourself. A tip, I do believe everyone on this call should do the minimizing bias tutorial. And I don't know if you want to take a separate note section for yourself, but on the test, you will be asked multiple questions about the difference between evidence, interpretation, and bias. And by multiple, I mean, you will see that a lot. They will say, here is a statement a teacher said, is it an example of evidence, interpretation, or bias? Or they will say, all of the statements below are evidence except one. Which one isn't an example of evidence? So again, evidence, interpretation, and bias. This is a module I think all of you should do. Putting it all together, and I will go into this a little more in depth when we come back from lunch, but putting it all together is where we get samples of questions from the test. So it's where you will get to score a video, but it's also where you will get to see test example questions. The test is made up of you watching 2 or 3 videos, excuse me, of a teacher, of a different teacher. You will score that teacher in the 8 components, and then you have multiple choice questions. They'll ask you about things that were seen in the video, and I'll tell you now, they'll say this was observed, and you'll say, I don't even remember that, but don't worry about it, it doesn't matter. They will give you examples and you will have to mark it. So again, minimizing bias and putting it all together are 2 modules I would definitely not skip over before trying to take the test. I feel like I've been talking at you for a really long time and it makes me feel sad. So I know I've raised your anxiety, but I think it's time to take a break and go to lunch, come back in an hour, and we will jump into Teachscape. We'll get practice on watching the videos. They are a little funky. Some videos, they're all in a panoramic view, but some are chopped up into 3 pictures within that panoramic view. Sometimes the video starts 10 seconds in, sometimes it starts 45 minutes into the lesson. They're all around 15 minutes long, and we'll score it and we'll go from there. And by the end, after lunch, you guys will be ready to jump into where you feel you need support and then ultimately take the test. I get asked lots of things. So during your lunchtime, if you want to think about questions for me about the test, I wouldn't take the test tonight.
Okay.
Just so you know, if I were you, I wouldn't. You really want to get into getting practice with how Teachscape scores, and I'll show you where that's at before you take the test. The Danielson trainer I had was named Anne, and she was amazing. And she told us, I'm a guru in Danielson. It's my job. And I didn't score perfect on the Teachscape test. So Teachscape isn't just about knowing Danielson. It's just understanding where they score, how Teachscape master teachers, I have no idea who they are, but how they choose to score. They're usually not very lenient on their scores or really harsh. So a lot of their scores fall within the 2 to 3 range of the performance level rather than the 1 to 4 range. But I want you to just chomp on that during lunch. Please join me back at noon and we will move forward. All right, for every video they show you on the test, you will have to score each time. Once you finish the video and start scoring, you are not able to go back and watch the video again. So please know that. While you're watching the video though, before you start scoring, you could replay the video again. So you can watch the video more than once, but the moment you are on the part of the assessment to actually put in a score, you cannot go back to the video. So what I want to do is, I think hopefully you can all see, Carol, you're the one I see on my screen right now. Can you see the Teachscape screen? Awesome. So when we go to watch the video, it's going to ask you to type your evidence here. Now, I will tell you, I do not type any of the scripting within Teachscape. It doesn't score it for you. It doesn't help you if you do. I just think it's more time consuming. But in order to move on to score, you have to put something here. So I just simply write the word score. It's up to you. You could just write 1 letter. You can see if I have nothing there, it won't let me move on. As soon as I type in at least 1 letter, I can move on. So I put score and I put add. It shows that I've added some sort of evidence. Then you'll be able to scroll down and actually click on a button that says score. If you choose to put your evidence in here, you can, and you're welcome to use your evidence and then connect it to each of your components, but you do not have to do that on the Teachscape. It's there for you if you want. Personally, I think it's going to only extend your test time. I would trust your own note-taking and however it is that you provided yourself some evidence. Once you click score, it's got a buffer to remind you, have you even watched the whole video? Are you ready to score? And you'll click yes. My screen has changed. Does it change for you, Carol? Does it say creating? Okay, perfect. So this is what it will look like when we have to score. It will give you the domain and component, and it will ask you to assign a level of performance. It doesn't give you the names. It's going to tell you level 1 through 4. 1 being unsatisfactory or ineffective, and 4 being distinguished. 2 is basic or developing. 3 is proficient or effective. If you had written in some evidence and assigned it to this component, it would show here on the side. So I am simply going to go through and mark proficient down. If we are all in a good group, big group, I would have you put it on Post-it notes and we take an average. But right now, we're not going to do that. We're going to see where you put yourself. Once you give a score, you then get to move to the next component. And this is exactly how it will be on the test. The components are given to you in order. They don't try to stump you here. Same thing. I'm just going to go through and give it all 3s. I don't suggest that's what you do when you take the test. It's because it's possible you won't get a video that's all 3s, or you might. And again, I'm doing this in what's called the practice session. When you have access to your focus, you're going to get to do this the same thing. Once you have scored all 8 components, you then get to come to this page. So this is where I want you to definitely pay attention. Remember, I put in all 3s. Whatever you put in your practice, it then compares it to what the master score was on Teachscape. And it gives you a rationale as to why Teachscape master score put it in that level. So I want you right now to pay attention to master scores. You're going to want to write them down next to your scores so you can do a little comparison. So for 2A, the master score was a 3. For 2B, the master score was a 4. 2C, the master score was a 3. 2D, the master score was a 4. 3A, the master score was a 4. 3B, the master score was a 4. 3C, the master score was a 3. And 3D, the master score was a 2. So as you can see, this teacher definitely had a variety of some 4s, some 3s, and even a 2. And if you are more than one apart, or if you're more than one apart on all of them, then that's when you're going to want to go back and start to say to yourself, okay, there's something happening in 2B that I need to focus on. I need to see what is it that Teachscape is looking for in 2B that maybe I'm not paying attention to. And that's why I encourage you, when you do these practice videos, don't just do one. You're gonna want to sit through. I know it's tough because they're not all the best videography of this classroom, but you're going to want to practice with multiples before you go and take the test. I do know if you're more than 2 points away, it hurts you more on the test than if you're just 1 point away compared to their master score.
I'm thinking I must be much more rigorous in my requirements because I scored low. I scored them lower on most stuff than the master score. The big thing is moving from 2 to 3. Like when I look at creating an environment of respect and rapport, and I'm looking back at what his interactions back and forth, I feel like there was some sarcasm in there and that kind of stuff, which takes me down to a 2. So is there a more lenient way of looking at it than I've been looking at it?
I
And
gave
so
him a 2 too.
that is, and you're not alone. That is really why I encourage that module of minimizing bias, because as an observer, we are all going to come in with biases. We are going to say, I mean, it's in our nature to say, oh, if only they maybe would have done that, or, ooh, why did they just say it that way? And so Danielson really focuses to do our best not to interpret or let our bias take over as we're observing, and simply go on what was stated. Not say, well, the tone and how they stated it wasn't good. No, what exactly was stated, and what are students' reactions? I will say I do find Teachscape not to be as hard on their videos or on their teachers as maybe we would be. It's funny that this had multiple 4s, because I don't really usually see a lot of 4s in the videos or a lot of 1s. They usually have a lot of 3s and 2s in the videos. And so that is why I ask you and encourage you to watch multiple videos, just to get used to, once again, it's not about knowing Danielson. And Katie, I know you're masterful at knowing the rubric, but it's about knowing how Teachscape approaches using that rubric. And I think there was a question in the chat. Oh, can you retake the test? Yes, you can. And actually, this is a good break for me. I'm going to introduce one of our regional superintendents, Brian Lambert, who I believe is still on the call, to just kind of talk about what are our expectations about the test, kind of when you're supposed to take it by, things like that. And then I'll calm your anxiety back down after Brian's done talking to you. Maybe oh no, there he is.
Oh, I'm here, come on.
About how many times you can take the test.
So I get to be the person that brings the anxiety. Thanks, Patty. So yes, you have to pass this. All of you that are on this Zoom, you are an evaluator, so you are going to need to pass this. And I'm going to tell you, you probably need to get this done really soon. And that's because you'll want to start your evaluations right away. You'll start doing pre-conferences. Your formal observation, where you score domains 2 and 3, you have till December 2nd or December 1st to do all the teachers on your caseload. If you're still working on passing your test, you can't score in Danielson. So now you're waiting to do observations. So my advice is to take your test before school starts, when this is fresh in your mind and you've done this. And then if you happen to fail, you'll get to take it again. But I think the first one is it 24 hours, Patty? And then
24 hours.
But the next time they take it, it's a bigger gap, right? Like
it's usually 30 days to allow them to go and do more modules. But I do believe we may have someone in the district who can change that. You know, if you write us, I think we can decrease that time. But I will tell you, sometimes somebody doesn't pass and we are able to see, not me, I run a school, I don't run Teachscape data during the year, but the district is able to see how much time you've spent on any module. So if you're on this call and you don't do well, and then they look and see that you've never logged into any modules, your regional superintendent is going to say, hey, Patty Hurley, I know you didn't pass, but you also didn't even attempt to help yourself pass. So please know that.
And I'm going to pick not on Beto because you're a principal, but I'll pick on Brenda since you're in Region 1. Brenda, I'm not going to go to Brenda. I'm going to go to her principal and say, hey, Marco, if Brenda doesn't get this together, you're going to do the whole building's principal, all the evals. And then Marco's going to start lighting a fire underneath. Now, I know over at UHS, Beto and Jeanette already got together and said, let's not pass it this year. let's really give it to our one AP to do the whole campus. I'm joking because Beto would never do that. But then, and this is where you don't want to have happen, Beto, because this has happened, your regional comes in and does the observations for you. Not a good way to start a relationship is when I have to come on your campus and do evaluations for you. That definitely shows up in your evaluation because you weren't following what the expectations are. My biggest thing with this, and every principal administrator has gone through this, spend the time now working on it, because when school starts, it's hard to give yourself the time. It's going to be a day where you come in. I would clear off like an afternoon. I'd sit and watch the whole video, and you want to like say, oh, I got what this is going to go, or how it's going. I've watched 3 minutes. Watch the whole video. Take notes for yourself, see things. How do I feel they're going to score? Look at the rubric, and then go and score. If you don't pass, it's not the end of the world. We still will love you, but then go and say, okay, where did I mess up? What do I need to watch to see maybe some practice in those areas? At the end of the day, you can always sit down and maybe offer to buy dinner for someone to sit with you. I will tell you, it's always nice to say, I felt it was a 3. What do you think? No one's going to want to sit with you just to be your friend. They're not that friendly to give up hours of watching videos, but it's good to talk through. If you think, Beto, Jeanette, you'll sit and do it together, you're going to have different videos. So they're not all the same. That's been tried, maybe by me. They're different. Patty, what else do you need me to say?
Well, Heidi told me that once a month, the regional soups will receive a update of
list.
who's passed and who
Yeah.
has not. And I
It's
want
mostly who's not. That's all.
I want
we-
all of you on this phone call to know that I am here for you. I have sat with many, including back in the day, an assistant superintendent, to help pass the test.
Wasn't me.
It
Wasn't
wasn't-
me.
was before Brian was an assistant. Brian needs other help. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he
Um,
does.
But Brian will tell you, I have sat with many to help them pass this test. So please know, if you don't pass it the first time and you write me, I say, okay, let's talk about it. And I'll come sit with you. It's a little harder as a principal to leave my site to do that, but I'll make time for you. I have Zoomed with somebody while they're writing it. I've been called, are you passing my school on your way home? Can you stop in? I'm stuck on a question. So I am here for you. When you leave this training, it's not like Patty came today on July 28th and I'm done with you. I care about each of you, and you will pass the test, and I will help each of you do it. I absolutely promise you. I will give you as many tips and tricks that I know of that has helped people. And so just
I would suggest, if you don't pass, reach out to Patty. Her school is right by the Costco by I-10. I would not ask her to come to you. That's a lot. I would say, hey, Patty, can I bring my laptop and sit in your office? That way she can still work, do her things, but she's there to support you.
So the other part we haven't told them, Brian, and you're going to make me tell them, it's a 2-part assessment. So there is part 1, and you can't take part 2 until you pass part 1. I was the crazy one. My mom to this day says, I remember it was midnight and I came out to check on you. I had little kids. I left them not alone with my husband, went to my parents where it was quiet, and at midnight I was still watching one of those videos. So I don't necessarily recommend taking both parts at the same, the same day, but if you're in the groove, why not? I do believe the first part has 3 videos and the second part has 2. There's 50 questions total on the test. So scoring them is part of those questions. So just know right after you click submit on question 50 out of 50, you will either get a green check mark that you've passed. I mean, you know immediately, or you will, I don't think that's going to happen to any of you on this test, or you might get the red X that you didn't pass. The bad part is it's scored in 5 sections, and nowhere has Teachscape ever provided us what each of those sections mean. So I won't be able to look at your score and say, oh, we need to do better on videos, or, oh, you didn't do well on interpretation, evidence, and bias. It doesn't give us that good of feedback. I've told Teachscape before, but they don't necessarily listen to me. So please just know I would not attempt the test until you have watched multiple videos and tried it. And Brian is correct when he says, don't just watch 3 minutes and stop it. If it's the test says it's 16.5 minutes and you want to stop it at 15, those last minute and a half is in that video for a reason. So please, please, please don't stop the video. But to save time, I would not script within the box that showed the evidence. I just think that's not necessary. It is a time test. You're given 3 hours to take it. I don't think it will take you those 3 hours, but just know within those 3 hours, you need to finish it. Oh, Brian, why'd you have to bring the tone and the mood so like, bleh?
Okay, I'll bring some fun. So if you're a fun person, we did, this is years ago, I'm going to date myself to when we first did this. We had Danielson parties and we all sat somewhere and we watched them. And if Carol was watching a different one and wasn't sure, she would say, hey, watch. And we would all give feedback. Those were back in the olden days. I can't even remember. I think I was at Hollinger, Brenda, when we maybe have done it. I can't remember. But this, I'm going to tell you, Patty is the district rock star in many areas, but Danielson, I go to Patty when I'm maybe someone's having a hard time or I need some help. Patty is your connection. She's a connection for many, many things. But one of the many would be Danielson. So you guys are very lucky. She'll take you through these. We may end up, we sometimes do Danielson reviews during ILAs. That's really about norming. So across the district, we want to be consistent. And so those will come up every once in a while. I don't think they come up enough, but we do that occasionally. Anything else, Patty?
No, I think we're good. Do any of you have questions for Brian? And he is right of having a buddy system. Just know you will not all see the same videos. So if you do it with a buddy, and there's just a group of principals who just recently passed. They took this training last year and they passed in June. And they sat together. And so they sat together for like 8 hours and did multiple people's tests together. If you want to do that, you can. I took my test by myself, but I'll tell you, I called 1,000 people beforehand and said, what was it like? What did the videos on the rubric that you have, that spiral bound rubric? As I watched videos, I would try to make notes like what the teacher's wearing, and okay, it was, I'd almost give me a diagram and I'd put the master scores there. Sometimes the practice videos are on the test, not always though. But that's my little cheat sheet guide if I need it to be. So please know that. All right. So now that your anxiety is probably like, I have to pass this test. Please know that usually they say, make sure you've attempted it by Labor Day. So I know you were just told, do it before school starts. And that big reason is because once school starts, our lives get crazy. But honestly, I think if you do it by Labor Day, you're going to be okay. So you all will assess yourselves where you are. Some of you are going to, I know, as soon as you get focused, try to get it done before Sunday evening. Others of you aren't. all of that is okay. And just know whenever you're taking it, you will get my cell phone today and my email. I am happy to FaceTime you, log on with you at any time to get you to pass that test. So please, please know that. All right. So what I'd like to do is watch another video. Now that you've had that practice, let's watch another video. You can choose whether to script or not. You're gonna then score. We'll take it to a master score. You'll be able to compare. And then my goal will be that you kind of leave with your own Teachscape plan, what modules you want to kind of look at. After that, I'll show you where we document this on Frontline, and then I'll be sending you on your way, and we're going to end a little early. Does that sound okay with you guys? So again, to get to those videos, you will go to the practice tab. You can see all the different videos I've shown over the different times or watched, but we're going to watch another video. And I'm going to go with a short one. I'm not going to go with 9 minutes, but I'm going to go with 13 minutes.
Understanding artifacts. What is an artifact? Let's talk about that first, because in your groups, you guys are creating a museum exhibit. And in doing so, you are the archaeologist. You are the museum curator. You're creating these pieces in a museum, in our 4th grade museum, that talks about these Native American tribes. But why is it that we need to know what the importance is of these pieces of history? What is it about these artifacts? Daniela.
Well, since the Native Americans build stuff for their tribe, the artifacts could teach us how they live.
So artifacts can teach us how a group of people lived, okay? Rocco?
It's a good usage they would use when they use the artifacts.
How they use the artifacts, right? What the importance was behind these artifacts. What else? Why else are these pieces of history important to people like us? Michael?
We can learn new things.
Okay, we can learn new things. What kind of new things? Giovanni?
What they use and what they did.
What they used and what they did with these things on an everyday basis. Elizabeth?
Not what a certain group used, but how it was in the past.
How things were, right? We could just say that. How things were. It's interesting if we think about that concept. Okay, so let's go through, and I would like Donald. Donald, go ahead and read to us. What is the book's definition of what an artifact is?
Artifacts are one kind of primary source. Artifacts are objects made or used by people who lived in the past. Archaeologists examine artifacts such as tools, pottery, and cave paintings to find out about how people lived long ago.
You guys nailed it. Exactly. You just explained to me what an artifact is. So let's take the idea of these artifacts and let's think of the bigger picture. It's great. We're making artifacts. Yippee. However, what is it exactly about those artifacts that are allowing us to learn about these people? So let's take a look at this. I asked you guys earlier, what did the Native Americans teach us? And what was their legacy? I want you to think about that for a few seconds here. And just think, what is it that the Native Americans taught us? And what was their legacy? And when you have something, go ahead and raise your hand. Layla?
The Native Americans taught us how to find food in the wilderness.
Okay, so let's say food. So I'm going to go ahead and write find. They taught us how to find food. So maybe, comma, we'll use the word wilderness. Resources. Okay. What else did the Native Americans teach us? Elizabeth?
I have what part of the legacy was.
Okay, go ahead.
Storytelling was part of the
Storytelling. That is something that we are going to discuss in more detail. Storytelling. Giovanni.
They showed us how to build things.
Build. How to build things. Okay. Build. Rocco.
Their legacy was how about their history.
History. What else? Isabella?
They left behind stuff like how they play music and baskets back in the day.
Okay, so we can also add that onto here. So how would you like to say that? How would you like me to write that on here as part of their legacy? They left behind. Okay, so we can use artifacts. Artifacts were a part of their history. Anything else? Anything else? Okay, those are great ideas. Let's take all of this and let's think about this on a big scale now. I am a part of history, and history is a part of me. If the Native Americans were the first people here in California, then what did they teach us? Well, you guys just said they taught us about using our resources. They taught us how to build things. They talked to us about storytelling and their lives. How can these things shape who we are today? How can they shape the way we live today? Rocco?
For what they taught us about to build, we can build buildings, homes, apartments, lots of things, lots of buildings.
Right. We're able to use our resources. We are able to adapt. And we learn that in science as well. Being able to adapt to our environment. Earlier, I heard some of you say their legacy was that they really appreciated their land. What does that mean? They appreciated their land. Donald?
Like they showed care for their land. Like if they killed an animal, they wouldn't just kill it. They would use it for maybe for clothes or shelter, where they would eat it. And yeah, so they wouldn't just waste it.
Oh, can you say that those last two words again? They wouldn't waste it. Okay, take that idea. They wouldn't waste it. They were such a waste-free group of people, right? How can we tie that into our life now? Every day here at school, how do we talk about that in our SLEs here? What does that even tie into? I mean, we learn about all of these things, but can we really make the connection? What connection can we make between these people and us today? Elizabeth?
The way that you thought of the idea of compost monitors to help kids put in the right bins and to make sure that they keep the earth healthy.
So we've taken a group of people from a long, long time ago and their ability to respect the land, to respect all of these things, to be able to be resourceful. And we can make the connection that, yes, we too today, you, and me, we are able to do the same exact thing. Isn't that amazing? It's almost like we've created some sort of relationship in a time capsule. Like we were able to travel back in time to learn about these people, and we're able to study them, and we're able to do projects on them, but we're also able to move forward to the present, to right now, and say, hey, we're connected. We're connected in some crazy way because we too are able to do these things just like the Native Americans were able to do a long time ago. So with that understanding and with that idea in mind, when you're working on your projects today, learning and picking up more facts and creating your artifacts for your exhibit, I want you to keep thinking in your mind, how are we connected? How can I as a person, as a student, make the connection that I am also a part of history, and this history is also a part of me. And I want you to think about that, because when we come back together, I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to have some pretty amazing suggestions, really good ideas as to how your legacy, what will your legacy be? What are you going to be able to leave behind so that when you guys leave this class, when you leave this school, when you are grown-ups, what's your story going to be? What are you going to be able to share? Just like the Native Americans were able to share so much with us, what will we be able to share for future generations to come? Elizabeth?
I know I would definitely share that I went to SAIC and that I think other people should come.
Yeah, and I want you to also think about, while you're working with your friends and you're reading up on all of these different tribes and their information, I want you to think about your own story, because you're learning about the stories of these different tribes. I want you to think about your own story, because your story is just as important as theirs. And someday your story is also going to be passed down to maybe, to your family members, to your friends, to people that you don't even know. Just like we didn't even know the Native Americans. We don't know them. We know them through their stories. We know them through research and through these artifacts that we're creating. That's how we can get to know people and create relationships and connections. So think about your own story and what you're going to be able to contribute to the greater picture. All right? So think about these things. What I want you guys to do now, leaving your books here. Actually, some of you will bring your books to your destination. Most of you probably will. Just leave your papers on your desk. If you are in the Miwok tribe, raise your hand. I would like the Miwok tribe to go ahead and stand up, tuck their chairs in, and go to your tribal area. Go ahead and go to your tribal area. And you may get started, yes. If you are in the, Yokut tribe, raise your hand. The Yokuts, go ahead and tuck your chairs in. Take your material, whatever you need to take notes, and go ahead and get started on your research and your building. If you're in the Mojave group, raise your hand. Mojave group, you guys go ahead, get to the stage, and you guys may start taking your notes and building your artifacts. And the Chumash. Oh yes, you can move the laptop onto the floor. Chumash group, go ahead and tuck your chairs in and get started. I will come around and check on you to see how your research and your building is going. Yes, you can water. You guys taking a look at artifacts? Awesome. Isn't this neat? We are able to recreate something so important.
And another artifact they used was like twigs and dried leaf, basically dried leaf twigs. They used it to make like a place, kind of like a placemat. Mm-hmm.
And all of these are things that shaped who they were as a group of people, right? I mean, how do you think these different pieces, Layla, how do you think these different artifacts shaped who they were as a community? Like why were these pieces important to?
All right, I'm gonna stop my share and I'm gonna give you time now. You can have your rubric out. I know somebody said if I could maybe review again how to use the rubric. So if you turn to page 21 of your rubric, or 20, that's where 2A starts. It gives you examples. It gives you the definition, what kind of defines or this description of 2A across all 4 performance levels. It then gives you critical attributes and possible examples on page 21 and 22. So I would use, if you're not comfortable with where you are in your Danielson, use this rubric as you go to score. This should be your buddy as you are taking the Teachscape test. The only thing I caution you on is, remember, part of this rubric does have our culturally responsive language, and that won't be how Teachscape is scoring the teachers that we see. So take a moment and score in the 8 components. All right, so once again, in order, if you see this add button is like whited out, so I cannot go in and score because I don't have any evidence put in. So you have to type something there. I just simply write score and add it. And then once I do that, I'm able to come down here and score. So again, you have to put yes. It's kind of like your safeguard. If you were to click no, it would let you go back and watch it again. So now I'm here. For the essence of time, I'm just going to put 3s all the way down. I don't recommend you do that. I would recommend you putting in your actual scores. All right, so it looks the same where you would have your score. It shows the master score and the rationale. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the numbers. You can write them down next to yours. 2A is a 3 master score. 2B is a 3. 2C is a 3. 2D is a 4. 3A is a 3. 3B is a 3. 3C is a 2. And 3D is a 2. So you can kind of look to yourself. If I, had said, oh, I really thought 3C was a 3, they scored a 2, I'm going to want to read what that rationale was. Sometimes we might think, oh, well, she put them into some groups, but it discusses why it's at a 2. I do want to quickly go back to 2D. And this is something I'm sorry I didn't mention earlier. But Charlotte Danielson says, when you are observing a teacher, if there is all student behavior is entirely appropriate and there's no evidence of misbehavior, it's an automatic 4. All right, Charlotte Danielson, no evidence of misbehavior, it's an automatic 4. All right, if you notice the teacher's monitoring and kind of doing that preventative work, that doesn't make them go down to a 3. If there's really no misbehavior, it's an automatic 4. And it's a great way for teachers to earn a 4 in that classroom management. So I know that I need to go look at some modules. So I want to remind you where those are. In the training section, these are where the modules live. So if you did not score very close to the master score in 2B, then my encouragement to you is to go check out 2B module. And I don't believe that you need to have an introduction and look at the elements. You probably know those things. But what you need to see is, what are they doing to get to a 3 or to a 2, whatever it might be. So for each level, and this is how all the modules look for each component, they will give you sample videos for every single level. So they give you multiple sample videos. They will show you what they believe a 3 is. They tell you a little bit more here. They show you that it's a 4th grade classroom, but they tell you exactly why the video clip you would watch is ranked a 3. They also give you what they believe is a high 3. So maybe something that could look like a 4, but why is it still only a 3? And then actually a low 3. So again, if you, after watching some of those practice videos, are finding yourself in a particular component that you just seem to consistently score different than the master score, that's when I would say, mark that component as a 1 that you want to go and attempt part of the module. But by doing the module, what I would ask you to do is look at the critical attributes that are here for you and their sample videos. So you get to understand what the Teachscape scorers are looking for. All right, last thing I want to show you on TeachStape is this putting it all together. So when you put it all together, what this module does is give you some practice videos and also sample questions that are on the test. So if you click on putting it all together, you can see that gives you sorting tips. It allows you to practice evidence, interpretation, and bias, which is a big part of the test. Sorting evidence. I'm going to go to this. And these are example questions that you will definitely see similar questions on the test. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. The teacher says it's fun to find the patterns for factoring polynomials. So you have to think, is this evidence, interpretation, and bias? Evidence is it happened. This is what the teacher stated. This is what the teacher said. This is what the student did. This is what the students did. Interpretation can be very similar to two students did not participate in the back because they were bored, or they closed their eyes because they were bored. That's an interpretation. You're interpreting their behavior. Bias could be the teacher should have used a different book to grasp their interest. That's a bias. That's where you are stating what could have changed the outcome of the lesson. So I would definitely go through putting it all together and practice these questions. So I'm just for fun gonna make a pattern. But once you select all of your answers, you then get to see if you're correct or not. And it tells you why. So that first one, the teacher says it's fun to find patterns for factoring polynomials. It's correct because it captures exactly what the teacher said. Even if you don't agree with what the teacher said, if that's what that statement is, it's evidence. This is not how I would do it. I would teach research. That is bias. Students enter the room, begin working at their desk. That would be actually evidence. So I'm showing you how it would be. The teacher cares about her students. I think this is a common one. Because we see them making connections, we might write this, but it's actually an interpretation because that's what we think it appears is happening. So please make sure you do minimizing bias, but you go to putting it all together and practice these questions, because those are the exact questions that are on the test. They have practice videos for you to score, just like we did earlier today, but they have test example questions. All right, so here's the last thing. Where do I document all of this? So what I don't know is if you, let me just show you. Can you see governing board policies on the screen? Okay. So if you go to TUSD1.org, oh, come on. Like you're gonna log in and you click staff. And unfortunately, I'm at a site that's not on the intranet, so I can't show you how this goes on the internet. Once you hit staff, you get all of these. Right now, don't click Office 365. That's like the black screen issue. But if you click on Frontline, that's another place you're going to want to live because that's where your evaluations live. So you would sign in, but I've already signed in. When you sign into Frontline, you will get to pick professional growth or recruiting and hiring. You're going to click on professional growth. So when you log on, this is how your dashboard will look. I can tell you it looks totally different than it did last year. So good luck to all my veteran colleagues who aren't going to know that it looks different. But on your left-hand side, you should have an evaluations tab. For some of you, you might already have teachers connected to you. Others of you may not. But I did give all your names to see if you could be first in line because you're my favorites. Don't tell my other colleagues. All right. So when you press on evaluations, if you go to My Info, that will be where your regional soup has you go to do your own evaluation. But to go to your teachers, you'll go to evaluations and process view. And you can try following along on your own if you want to. But when you get to process view, you will see all of your teachers listed and you'll see yourself. A couple of things. If you don't see all of your teachers, you'll want to make a note of which teachers aren't there. And you're also going to want to make a note of which teachers are there but are no longer at your building. But a few things you should know. If you have a teacher who you don't know much about, there is a beautiful little icon here on the right-hand side that allows you to see all of their previous evaluations. So when I click on this teacher and this icon on the right, Kirsten, you're the only one I see on my screen. Did it change to all their evaluations? Okay, I'm not sure which apps will change for me or not. But as you can see, this teacher's been in the district for a while. And so I can click on any of these evaluations. I'm going to click on one. And I can see their past evaluation. Right here, all I can simply see is that it's been completed. But if I wanted to go in and see their composite score, I can click on the little plus button to open up that tab. And I can view their composite score. And please don't pass around this teacher's name. I don't think she'll mind that I'm looking at it, but as you see, this is, once their evaluation is completed, this is what the teacher sees. It shows what points they received for Danielson. It shows their academic growth points. You do not put those in. That is put in by assessment and evaluation. That is determined by the district and different tests depending on the grade level your teacher teaches. There is a student survey that your students will fill out usually in the late part of second quarter. That student survey also does not get added by you. It automatically gets added by assessment and evaluation. And then a big 1 point is important to be added for their teacher self-reflection. So once they do their teacher self-reflection and you go in and actually say that it's been done, they get that 1 point. And I will tell you, I've had teachers on the cusp of effective to distinguished, and it will, it moves them up to the next category. So please make sure you get them done. Guys on the call, your teachers can do it until May 14th at midnight. I know it says December 1st. I give a pretty big grace period to my teachers. I don't tell them right away, but if by December 1st they haven't done it, I don't hound them not to do it. I think it's important they look at their own growth. This composite score is kind of a long report. Why? It will show what all their scores were for all 22 components and give any information that the evaluator put in there. And then it will show, oh, these 3 questions weren't answered, but they will have to be for you guys. Then for whatever reason, the report shows all those scores again. Don't ask me why. This is frontline. At the very end, it shows their achievement data scores, their teacher self-reflection scores, and the last thing would be teacher signature and evaluator signature. So this is the final. I will tell you, once you start to put in Danielson scores, it's actually going to always say ineffective here at the top. It won't start to say the others until you've put in that teacher self-reflection 1 point. And we start to get the other scores from other things, okay? So that's, again, how you can go and see what a teacher got last time. So the reason I bring this up is just so you know, this is where you will document all of your stuff. And I know I'm looking at a teacher that's completed, but it's the only way I can show you. Beginning of the year conference, this is where you will go in and I'm going to open this. I'm not sure how well it will look for me. It doesn't because I can't do it, but it will say date of the beginning of the year conference. I can show you this. This evaluator submitted it without even putting in what date they did it, right? But we're not here to talk about what they did or didn't do. Just know that it will ask you, when did you do it? Mine always usually says one of these first few days in August. And then simply it will ask you, was the conference completed? And you're going to mark yes. Okay. Then your protocol for pre-observation conference. I will tell you that when this was first implemented, we made our teachers fill out this form of these 6 questions. It definitely got pushback. And the following year, we were told we didn't have to have our teachers do this. So know that you cannot require them to do this. You could encourage, but you're not allowed to say it's a requirement that they answer these questions. So I get around that in a little bit different of the way. I tell them that their pre-conference helps me gather the data I need for domain 1. And here are the 3 questions I ask my teachers to come to the conference with. The first one is for them to tell me how they ensure they know what they are to be teaching, which kind of gets at that pedagogy and instruction. How do they ensure? How do they plan for that? The second question I ask them is what do they do to get to know their students' academic and social emotional needs? So then they can talk to me around 1B. What are they getting? What are they doing to get to know their students? The third question I ask them is how do they use the information from the first 2 questions to plan their instruction and to plan their assessments? Again, you can't necessarily require them to do that, but when I ask those 3 questions and tell them that will help give me info for their domain 1 evidence, most teachers are like, absolutely, I'll answer those questions. If they don't come to the conference with those questions answered, I ask them during the conference, I type it up, I copy and paste whatever I type up into the notes section of that pre-observation conference form, and then we have it saved. I can't show you the notes section because it's not live yet. Teacher self-review. That's the only time the teachers will log in and have to write something for you. I just want to show you what it will look like. When the teachers log in, they are to score themselves on the 22 components. They have to click one of these areas. I can't click and change it for the teacher, and either will you be able to, but they haven't clicked if it's not orange. So just know that. When the teacher does this, at minimum, they are supposed to give you evidence for at least 1 component per domain. So I tell the teachers, you can pick Bs, 1B, 2B, 3B, 4B. You can pick 1C, 2C, 3C, 4C. I also give my teachers a choice, and this is the Patty Hurley choice, not necessarily what we've been told, but because we know we're going to get so much evidence from their observation, I tell them I'm okay if they give me more evidence for domain 1 and 4 than in 2 and 3, because I will be copying and pasting that evidence when I have to score them for 1 and 4. Again, that's up to you. I'm just trying to give you guys some tips to help you out. When you go to observe the teacher, you will score them in what's called observation number 1. And it has a teacher announced observation. All the little tabs here aren't live. You can send them a schedule through here. Some administrators choose to, some just choose to do it through Outlook. It's up to you. You don't have to use it through Frontline, but you will score them right here on teacher announced observation. And your scoring will look similar to the teacher self-reflection. You will get to choose where you put them, where you place them. There is a section for notes and evidence where you can definitely copy and paste things from the scripting that you did that help you there. The other beautiful thing, and I'm sorry I can't show it to you live, is that you as an administrator will have a list of critical attributes for every single component. And you'll be able to click any of those. And when you do, they automatically show up on their evaluation. That's like a beautiful thing. Instead of having you to write it, anything you click on will be added to their evaluation. Okay. As you can see here, we don't see the script of the teacher in the actual notes and evidence. We see some things, but we don't see anything that says the teacher stated this or the students did that. I'll tell you what some administrators do. I personally love it. I upload their entire script as an artifact and then make smaller notes and evidence in the notes and evidence. You are welcome to copy and paste everything that goes for 2A under 2A and 2B under 2B. But if you explain it to your teacher, your script is completely uploaded, and in your post conversation, you just make sure you're hitting on things, that is okay. All right, this takes time, ladies and gentlemen. And so I'm trying to give you some tips to help with time savers.
Question.
All right, a couple of things here, and I'll let you ask me some questions. After you score them, just so you know, you will have buttons at the bottom that say submit. One says save and notify. One just says save. So you can go in and save it. You don't have to do it all at once. Every time you go in, you don't have to tell the teacher you're in there yet. Once you do hit submit though, the teacher will be able to see it and acknowledge it. But the beauty of Frontline is once you hit submit, let's say you've decided there's something else you want to add, you'll always have a button that says edit. And you'll get to click edit. It will ask you that, do you realize you'll have to submit again? And you say yes, and then it allows you to open back that document and edit. So if a teacher has submitted their teacher self-review and then says to you, oh, I actually have more data or something else I want to add, you just get to go back in and say edit, and it opens it up for the teacher. Domains 1 and so in observation 1 is where you'll score them for domains 2 and 3. Domain 1 gets scored separately, and domain 4 gets scored separately. It looks exactly the same as the others, but I'm going to show it to you. Again, you're clicking boxes. There's critical attributes. Please remember this year, thanks to Rashonda and her awesome department's work, you are able to click on attributes that also discuss culturally responsive teaching, which leads to a great conversation. If they start to say, well, I really think I'm distinguished. Well, let's look at the attributes here at the bottom, and you tell me the difference. And sometimes you don't have to say anything as the administrator. They'll say, yeah, I'm not there yet. But then that's our goal for next year. All right. The summative evaluation is something you'll do in the spring. There are 3 questions that have to be answered. This will say that the teacher has to answer them on here, but the teacher usually can't access them anymore. So I simply send an email to the teacher asking them to answer these 3 questions, which are, what were the teacher's significant achievements this year? I want to hear from them what they think. What are the teacher's significant areas for growth? I want to hear from them. And then this is my favorite. It says any additional comments and that it's optional, but I will tell you when it's live, there's a red asterisk. And if you don't put something in that box, so it's really not optional, but it makes you believe it is. So I usually put something there about this teacher is an integral part of ITHS. I kind of create some copy and paste things that I might use on multiple teachers. If you find yourself using some of the same comments, I open up a Word document and put some of those comments that I seem to use. And when I'm filling out evaluations, I have that open so I can copy and paste and not do as much typing. And then the last thing is the teacher composite score. You don't really have to do a lot there until it's time for them to acknowledge it and sign it. That's what just kind of accumulates everything that you document in all the other areas. So I have just thrown a ton of junk at you. What questions do you have for me around frontline teachers documenting this evaluation stuff? I see the chat.
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
I think it was also asked in the chat too by Katie, but there was a question about the scripting itself. In some districts I've worked in, it was like an actual scripting where you have to go word for word as much as you can capture. Some it's been a narrative style where you throw in like a story of what you saw, pulling in some quotes from the teacher to accentuate the points that you have. What do we prefer here?
So the district prefers that we script to the best of our ability, but I can tell you what the district prefers and maybe what, if we were to survey all 89 principals at our schools, we might not get that same answer. But what it says is that we will script the teachers in that formal evaluation. I would just be careful in the narrative. I'm not saying you would do this, but though that the narrative isn't interpretation or bias driven, correct? So if you do a narrative, the good thing is you get to have a pre-conference with your teachers. It's okay to be a little bit like, hey, what do you prefer? I personally don't score anybody before I meet with them post-conference. I make them look at where they had themselves in a self-review. I make them look at their evidence and tell me, are we really a 4? Are we really a 3? I get them to actually be a part of it. It takes a lot longer time, but I find that then they don't say, oh, Patty just only gives 3s, or right, then it's off my plate. They're having to look at what they said. Some teachers are shocked because they've never seen a script of everything they've said. Like, I say 22 times in 1 minute. Yeah, you do. Or I never left the front of my classroom. So you will have your own post-conference style and your observation style. The big thing I encourage all of you on this call is that you're consistent. And then Beto, you have an amazing team. You're not alone. So I would make sure the 3 of you go, there's 3 of you, right? Okay, that you go and observe some teachers and kind of calibrate together. So then it doesn't become, well, Jeanette gives all 4s and well, I go to Andrea because she just gives me what I want. But then Beto doesn't do that, right? So that's just a good thing. Any of you on this call who have multiple administrators on your campus, you want to be calibrated in how you're addressing this so that it doesn't create teacher versus admin group on your campus. Katie Kuhn, you asked a question. Can you add evidence from walkthroughs that will increase the score after the original observation? So that's a really good question. It won't automatically add something for you. But I will tell you that I've had some teachers who are on the cusp of a 2 and a 3. I'm not going to pick on new teachers because I love them, but often that's a new teacher because by December 1st, they're just trying to stay above water, just like us administrators. So I will say to them, let's talk about this. What steps could you take? What could we see? And I'll ask them if they would be okay with me coming through and collecting evidence just for that. And if I'm able to add it, that we then change the score. And then you can physically go back in and change the score. And it saves you from having to do a full formal eval on all 8 components. That just also helps your coaching and collaboration model of evaluation instead of it just being, well, they came in one time, they gave me that, and they don't let me work on anything else. The other thing you asked is, do we have a computer template for scripting? There isn't one. I know sometimes people will share one. I personally just like to script in Word and do it on my own, but if you have one you want to share with others, you're welcome to. At the bottom, when this goes live, there may be a walkthrough instrument that you can use and upload. You don't have to. It's not showing there now, so I'm not sure if they will bring it there. Any other questions I can answer for you in general?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So when we script, we can just open a Word document and then script everything on there and then upload that. We don't have to go underneath 2A. It's okay if we don't do that. We can just upload it.
It is. It is.
Okay.
It is. Well, I'll just tell you, this is being recorded, but I have done that now for 6 years.
Okay.
I have never been grieved by a teacher, knock on wood. But I tell them what I'm doing, right? And I make sure we discuss it. And then those critical attributes are huge. Like, I love that you can click on them and that becomes part of the narrative that I didn't have to create or come up with. I've asked for those critical attributes to be put on their teacher self-review because I think if they were there, they would actually assess themselves in a more realistic way. So I have shared them. I've copied and pasted them and shared them in a document before and said, please use these as this is really what helps, place you in a performance level.
Thank you.
It saves you time, Teresa.
Yeah.
Also ask your principal, Terry, and Teresa what she wants.
Sounds good.
Are there any other questions for me around Teachscape or Frontline? And I know part of it is you're going to have to go in and play.
So with Frontline, is there paperwork you have to fill out in order to get access to it, or have we already been added to it?
No, you're going to want to check if you've been added. You'll be able to see if you can log in and see any. You might be on there but not have teachers yet. They are still working on that. The person I asked wasn't aware that you would need that by today, and I said, well, I just prefer to show you guys everything you're going to need involving evaluation. But if you're not on there, William, and you want to email me, I'll send it forward to the person who's adding teachers.
Okay. Thank
If
you.
you're on a campus with multiple admin, the principal will assign you who your teachers are that you'll be evaluating.
Okay.
Carol, tell Bobby to only give you the good ones.
Patty, I got a question. So
Yeah.
when we're doing this scoring, when it comes to whether you passed or not, is the deviation from what they say the score is? I mean, like, can you be 1 off on 4 out of the 8, 1 off on 6 out of the 8? If you're 2 deviations away, you're screwed.
That's a really good question. Someday I'm going to work for Teachscape, I think, and change how they do some things. But I know that if you're 1 point away, it does not hurt you as much as if you're 2 points or more away from them. If you are more than 1 point away for more than half of the components, so more than 4, that is going to hurt you than if you just on 2 of the components. I really do think, though, is I know the videos are important, but I really think they put more weight. They don't tell me this. I just feel they put more weight on those multiple choice questions. Evidence, interpretation, and bias. If you guys haven't heard that from me enough today, then you're not listening, because those are important. And then simply knowing when they ask you these following statements, pick which one or which multiple of them, it could be more than one, are all under 2A. I wouldn't answer that question without 2A being open right here and kind of seeing what they wrote and comparing it to what's in the rubric. Because some of those answers are similar to what's in our rubric. All right, so we're coming to the end. I told you I'm going to do my best to get you out early, but please write down my cell phone number right now. Actually, I'll put it in the chat also. I just asked if you text me, tell me who you are, because otherwise I think you're trying to sell my house, buy my house, give me car insurance. Just kidding. But 520-429-6848 is my cell phone number. And I'm here for all of you. So my goal is that you will all pass. That's the biggest outcome. And I'm here to help you pass. And I'm also here as you start to do evals and say, Patty, where do I put this? Or what does that look like? Please contact me, call me, email me, and invite me to a Zoom. As long as I'm not Zooming with my teachers, I'm happy to join you and help you out. But just know you're never alone, even if you're the only admin in your building. Join with colleagues, call us, make buddies, and I'm happy to help you with everything. I can't change who your regional assistant superintendent is, so you have to deal with whoever you have. Just kidding. But please just call me and I'm here for you. And good luck. And I'll see you in a Zoom near you.